Okay, this is a video on writing equations of a parabola. We're going to focus on intercept form and vertex form, but then also convert to standard form. So first things first, you need to know the difference between the different forms. So this is intercept form, also sometimes called factored form, since it's written factored. And then remember that our P and Q are our X-intercepts. So the first thing you need to do is substitute the value of the X-intercepts into the general equation. And that'll leave you with y and a and x to solve for. Then you choose another point for x and y, plug that in, and solve for a. So that'll make more sense once we do an example here. So first I start with plugging in my P and Q, my X-intercepts, and you can let either one be P and the other one be Q. It doesn't really matter. So if P is -3 and Q is 1, those are your X-intercepts. I'm going to start by plugging those in. If I get X minus -3, that's going to be X plus 3, and then X minus 1. So far I've just plugged in P is -3 and Q is 1. Then I'm going to choose another point, an XY point, and you can choose any point you want except for you can't use the X-intercepts because those have already been chosen. So I'm going to use the vertex there as -1, 2. Now this is an XY point, so we have -1 is X and Y is 2. And I know that this point is on the parabola. So I'm going to plug in 2 for Y, and I'm going to plug in -1 for X. So I get 2 equals A times -1 plus 3 times -1 minus 1. And then I can go ahead and solve that for A. So first thing I'm going to do is evaluate what's in the parentheses here. I'm going to get 2 equals A. -1 plus 3 is 2. -1 minus 1 is -2. So that's 2 equals A. 2 times -2 is -4. Then to finish solving for A, I can divide both sides by -4. I'm going to get A equals 2 over -4, which can be reduced by 2. Simplify, and you get -1/2. So A is -1/2. So then go ahead and go back to my original and plug in A equals -1/2, and then X plus 3 and X minus 1. So that would be my final answer. Okay, let's do another one here. I'm just going to switch colors. Again, start with your P and Q. This one has a double root, which means that I only have one X-intercept here. It's just 2. That means that P will equal 2 and Q will equal 2. You still have 2, it's just a double root. So we start with that. A equals, or Y equals A, be X minus 2 and X minus 2. So your X-intercepts are both 2. So P and Q are both 2. Then choose another point. I'm going to use the one they gave me here, 0, 4. So I'm going to plug in 0 for X and 4 for Y. So plugging in 4 for Y and 0 for X. And then evaluating that. So 4 equals A. 0 minus 2 is -2. 0 minus 2 is -2. 4 equals A. -2 times -2 is -4. Divide both sides by -4. And A equals -1. So my final answer then would be Y equals -1. X minus 2 times X minus 2. Substituting that back in. Do one more without the picture. If it just says, write the equation in intercept form. So you need to first know what intercept form is in the general form. Then you need to remember that P and Q are your X-intercepts. So this is like P and this is Q. And a vertex is an example of another point that would be like your X and Y. So I always like to just start by plugging in my P and Q. If it's P is -3, X minus -3 will be X plus 3. You minus a negative, you're adding. And Q is 1. Then my second step, I plug in my X and Y. So I'm plugging in 2 for Y, and then I'm plugging in -1 for X. So I'm going to get 2 equals A 2 -2. 2 times -2 is -4. Divide by -4 on both sides. You get A equals -1/2. So I'm going to take this one step further now, and I'm going to plug that back into my equation. So -1/2 X plus 3 X minus 1. This is in factored form. Now I'm going to take that and I'm going to turn it into standard form. So remember, standard form is when you have ax squared plus bx plus c. So if I want to turn this factored form into standard form, I'm going to have to multiply it out. So the first thing you're going to want to do is multiply the x plus 3 and the x minus 1. And you can either use the FOIL method or you could do the box method, whichever you prefer. Just for time here, I'm going to FOIL it. So I'm going to do -1/2, and then I'm going to FOIL x plus 3 times x minus 1. So right now I'm not doing anything with the -1/2. I'm just going to multiply this out. That's going to be x squared minus 1x plus 3x and minus 3. Combining like terms then here, I'm going to have an x squared. -x plus 3x is plus 2x minus 3. And then your last step would be to distribute that -1/2 to each part in here. So you're going to have y equals -1/2 times x squared. -1/2 times 2x will be -1x. And -1/2 times -3 is positive 1.5 or positive 3/2. And so then this would be in standard form. So we have those answers in factored form up here in pink, and then standard form down here in red. So I have them in both forms. Okay, now we're going to do vertex form too. So in vertex form, you need to get the vertex from the graph. Then you plug that in for your HK. Then you need to find another point, x and y, just like we did in the last one, to solve for A. And then substitute back in A, X, and K back into the equation to write the answer. So here's an example. Vertex, that's going to be my HK. Another point's going to be my XY. So first, the general form of vertex is AX minus H squared plus K. So I'm going to start by just plugging in my vertex. It's going to be X minus -2, so plus 2 squared plus 1. Then I have this point for X and Y over here, so I'm going to plug that -1 in for Y, and I'm going to plug in 1 for X. And you do have to be a little bit careful when you're solving for this one. Take this up here. -1 equals a 1 plus 2 squared plus 1. So if I wanted to solve for A, I'm going to start by subtracting 1 on both sides to get rid of this 1 over here. So you get -2 equals A. Then I'm going to combine 1 plus 2 in here is 3. 3 squared then. Then 3 squared is 9. And divide by 9 on both sides. And you're going to end up with -2/9. So A equals -2/9. So this is your A value. So you can come back up to your original equation, and then for A here, we'll replace that with the -2/9. And then this is our answer. So -2/9 x plus 2 squared plus 1. That would be in vertex form. Okay. Here's an example with a graph. So here's our vertex. That will be our H and our K. And then another point, we could either use this one or we could use this one. It doesn't really matter. 0, 0 is a nice point to use if we have the opportunity because it's easy to plug in 0. So start by plugging in the H. It'll be x plus 3 squared, and then the plus 9 for K. Then I'm going to replace x and y with 0 and finish solving for A. I like to subtract my K over to get the A part by itself first. And then I do 0 plus 3 is 3. And I'm going to have to square that. And 3 squared is 9. So I get A times 9. So divide by 9 on both sides. And A is going to equal -1. Then I can go back up into my original here and plug in -1 for A. And then this is my answer. And that's it. Now if you want to change that one into standard form, if you want to go from vertex to standard, it requires a little bit more work. So remember, standard form then is the ax squared plus bx plus c. So I have to multiply that out. Right now I have -1 times x plus 3 squared plus 9. So you have to follow your order of operations when multiplying this out. First you'll have to do the x plus 3 squared. So you have to do x plus 3 times x plus 3. So that's going to be x squared plus 3x plus 3x plus 9. I just FOILed that out. Then all of that will be times -1, and then all of that will be plus 9 at the end. So after you square it, the next step in order of operations is to multiply by -1. I am just going to combine like terms real quick because I have 3 x's. That's going to be 6x. So then multiply everything there by -1. You're going to get -1x squared minus 6x minus 9. And then finally you can add 9 at the end. So you'll get -1x squared minus 6x plus 0. So the plus 0 is not really needed. So this would be our final answer in standard form. So I went from vertex form here to standard form here by multiplying it out. When you multiply it out, just remember to follow the PEMDAS order of operations. So I did the exponents, then I multiplied, then I did the addition at the end. All right, thanks for watching.